Lead like Moses, Timeless Leadership Lessons for Building People, Systems, and Legacy in Crisis and Change. By Oluwaseun Alexander Dada. Preface. When leadership feels like a wilderness. What does true leadership look like when the road ahead is unclear, the people behind you are restless, and the weight on your shoulders feels too heavy to carry? That question haunts more leaders than most will admit. Not every leader starts with confidence. Some start with reluctance. Some lead with trembling hands, heavy hearts, and silent questions. Some never asked to lead at all, they were simply called. That's Moses. He didn't fit the mold. He didn't chase the spotlight. He had no desire for power or position. Yet, God placed a nation on his back and a vision in his heart and said, "Go." Moses led not from a place of ease but from a place of encounter. His classroom was the wilderness. His congregation was often ungrateful. His reward was rarely recognition. And yet, his story remains one of the most powerful portraits of transformational leadership the world has ever known. This book is not a biography of Moses. It is a blueprint, a practical, spiritual, and strategic guide for anyone called to lead in complexity, conflict, or uncharted terrain. It is for the startup founder navigating chaos, the educator reforming broken systems, the politician standing alone with integrity, the pastor leading through fatigue, the visionary who sees promise ahead but feels the pain of the process. It is for the leader who wakes up every morning asking, "Am I really the one for this?" If you've ever questioned your capacity but still felt the fire of your calling, this book is for you. If you've ever led people who resisted your leadership, misunderstood your motives, or forgot your sacrifices, this book is especially for you. Moses teaches us that real leadership doesn't begin when we arrive, it begins when we obey. That legacy is not built in comfort but in consistent surrender. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep walking even with dust on your feet and doubt in your mind. This book is your invitation to lead with clarity in the middle of chaos, to hold fast when others let go, and to remain faithful when fame, fear, or fatigue tempt you to compromise. Moses didn't reach the promised land, but he raised up people who did. That's legacy. That's leadership. And that's the kind the world desperately needs today. So turn the page. Step into the fire. Pick up the staff. And lead. Because the mountain is calling. Oluwaseun Alexander Dada. How this book is structured. A guide to the journey ahead. This book is divided into 3 distinct but connected parts, each reflecting a key stage in Moses' leadership and in yours. It's designed to move with you, not just inform you. Whether you're in the early stirrings of a calling, deep in the trenches of leadership fatigue, or thinking about the legacy you'll leave, this structure will help you locate yourself and lead with greater clarity. Part 1. The Wilderness Within, Formation Before Platform. Chapters 1 to 4. Before God ever sent Moses to confront systems, he first met him in solitude. This section explores the inner formation every leader must walk through, the wrestle with insecurity, the burn of calling, and the silent seasons that feel like delay but are actually preparation. You'll confront doubt, rediscover your voice, and learn that true leadership doesn't start with applause, it starts with obedience. Part 2. Systems and Setbacks, Leading in Complexity Without Losing Yourself. Chapters 5 to 8. This is where your leadership moves from the personal to the structural. Moses didn't just carry a message, he confronted Pharaoh, built systems, faced complaint, fatigue, and breakdown. These chapters offer practical tools for sustainable leadership, how to lead people who resist you, build systems that outlast you, and endure pressure without compromise. Part 3. Legacy over Limelight, Finishing Well. Chapters 9 to 10. You've started. You've endured. But can you finish well? This final section explores what it means to lead for legacy, not ego. You'll learn how to empower others, make peace with what you won't complete, and step into a definition of success that's deeper than visibility, it's about fruit that remains. Each chapter also includes real stories, from leaders around the world navigating the same tensions you are. Strategic tools, practical frameworks to implement what you're reading. Reflective questions, to help you internalize and personalize each lesson. Feel free to read straight through or pause where the Spirit speaks loudest. This book is not just meant to be read. It's meant to shape your rhythm, your strategy, and your legacy. Introduction. This is not just a book. It's a blueprint for transformational leadership across every sphere: business, government, education, tech, media, faith, healthcare, and beyond. It's a call to those who lead companies, classrooms, communities, and causes. It's for visionaries who refuse to settle for survival, who believe they were born to shift systems, elevate others, and build something that outlives them. This is about legacy over limelight, conviction over convenience, fire over fame. Inspired by the life of Moses, Lead Like Moses is not confined to religious leadership. It is a universal manual for leading in the middle of chaos, complexity, and cultural transition. Whether you're launching a startup, leading a nation, mentoring a team, or simply trying to survive the pressure of purpose, the principles in this book will meet you where you are and move you forward. Why this book? Why now? Because the world is starving for leaders who carry both clarity and character. Because systems are shaking, institutions are failing, and people are desperate for voices that don't just echo noise but carry truth. Because leadership is no longer just a title. It's a responsibility, a fire, a burden, a call. And you feel it. That holy discontent. That restlessness that says, there has to be more. There is. This book will show you how to find it, carry it, and release it faithfully, boldly, and sustainably. What makes this different? While most leadership books are built on charisma or corporate case studies, this one is built on encounter, endurance, and evidence drawn from both ancient wisdom and modern leaders across continents and industries. You'll meet CEOs, educators, activists, founders, artists, healthcare workers, and policymakers, men and women who, like Moses, were called into something bigger than comfort zones. Their stories will stir you. The strategies will ground you. The revelations will stretch you. And when it's all said and done, you won't just read about leadership. You'll step into it. A global movement begins here. This isn't just a book to be read. It's a movement to be lived. A new generation of leaders is rising, not to dominate, but to deliver. Not to chase status, but to shift culture. Not to build empires, but to leave impact. And if that's what you want, impact that echoes across industries, borders, and generations, then you're holding the right book in your hands. So wherever you're reading this, from a high-rise in New York, a village in Nigeria, a boardroom in Berlin, a classroom in Delhi, or a studio in Sao Paulo, know this. You are not too small. It is not too late. And this fire in you is not an accident. Read it. Live it. Share it. Let Lead Like Moses be the spark that ignites your influence, not for ego, but for purpose. Not just for platforms, but for people. And if you let it, this message will make your name known for good. This fire will open global doors. And this story will shape history. Let's lead. Let's shift nations. Let's change everything. To the glory of God. Part 1. The Wilderness Within, Formation Before Platform. Covers chapters 1 through 4. Before God ever sent Moses to confront Pharaoh, he first met him in the wilderness and stripped him of everything he thought made him useful. This part of the journey doesn't begin in a palace or a boardroom. It begins in the desert, alone, confused, and far from everything familiar. It begins in the place where calling feels like an interruption. Where vision feels too heavy. Where leadership doesn't look like triumph, it looks like retreat. Part 1 is for every leader who's been called but not yet commissioned. For every visionary still tending sheep. For every soul who feels delayed but not dismissed. These chapters explore the kind of formation most people skip and many resent. But this is where real leadership is born. Here, Moses learns to lead without crowds. To trust without clarity. To obey without applause. And you will too. You'll walk through the fire that doesn't burn out. You'll confront the insecurities that keep you small. You'll learn that God does His greatest work not in your gifts, but in your surrender. If you've ever thought, I'm not ready. I'm too flawed. I missed my moment. Then this part of the book was written for you. Because leadership doesn't start with a title. It starts with an encounter. And what happens next is not about proving yourself. It's about remembering who called you and letting that voice be louder than all the others. So take a breath. Take off your sandals. You're standing on holy ground. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Called out of hiding. Before the headlines, before the miracles, before the fame of a sea split in two, Moses was a fugitive. Hiding from his past. Running from failure. Grieving the gap between who he thought he could be and who he had become. And that's where God found him. This is how leadership often begins. Not with applause, but with obscurity. Not in the palace, but in the desert. Not on the platform, but in a place of hiding. You may think you missed your moment. But maybe your moment has been waiting for you to stop running. Moses wasn't done. He was just buried beneath disappointment, fear, and an identity that no longer fit. In this chapter, we uncover what it means to be called out of hiding. The hiding places of shame. The masks of false identity. The mental scripts that say, I'm not enough. Because before God ever sends a leader into the world, he calls them to himself. Let this be that moment for you. We often misunderstand silence as insignificance. But what if God does his loudest work in your quietest seasons? What if your lowest moment is the exact soil where legacy begins? Hiding is not an abandonment. It's an invitation to unlearn everything the world falsely taught you about your worth. Moses had every reason to believe his leadership days were over. He had killed a man. He was living in exile. His story, in his own eyes, had ended. But to God, it had only begun. God's call doesn't operate on human timelines. It transcends failure. It weaves grace into regret. It reaches you in the caves you've constructed to keep yourself safe. And it whispers, there's more. The desert Moses found himself in wasn't punishment, it was preparation. It became the classroom for humility, the training ground for courage, the space where his character caught up with his calling. You may be in a similar wilderness. Unknown. Unseen. Questioning everything. But that is not where your story ends. That's where it's being rewritten. Let the silence teach you. Let the delay deepen you. Let the loss refine you. Because when the time comes, and it will, a voice will call you by name, just as it did Moses. And you'll realize, you weren't hiding to escape your purpose. You were hiding so you could finally be ready to carry it. Real stories. When the call came. 1. Ayo, entrepreneur, Nigeria. Ayo built a small design studio out of his university dorm. After a major deal collapsed and left him bankrupt, he moved back in with his parents. For 18 months, he did nothing but binge-watch shows and question every dream he'd ever had. One morning, a former client messaged him, "You disappeared. But I still believe in your work." That single message pulled Ayo out of despair. He started designing again. Today, he runs a creative agency with clients in 5 countries. That season taught me that failure isn't the opposite of calling. Sometimes, it's the beginning of it. Failure broke the version of me that was built on pride. Hiding introduced me to the version that was built on purpose. 2. Lena, executive, Germany. Lena had led global strategy for a multinational corporation. After a public scandal unrelated to her, she resigned to protect her team's reputation. The media painted her as complicit. She hid in a small mountain town for a year, completely unplugged. One day, while mentoring teens at a local church, she realized leadership wasn't about stage. It was about service. Now, she trains ethical leaders across Europe. Her hiding became her healing. That season redefined her leadership philosophy: serve first, shine later. 3. Amir, community organizer, Jordan. After a failed political campaign that left him publicly humiliated, Amir avoided the spotlight. He worked anonymously in refugee camps, helping displaced families find housing and education. Years later, a journalist covering regional resilience efforts said, "Every time I trace real progress, your name shows up. Why aren't you in office again?" That comment reopened his heart. He didn't run for office again. Instead, he founded a leadership academy for young activists. My voice didn't need a podium. It needed peace. It's not about the position you hold. It's about the people you help. 4. Tara, fashion designer, India. Tara's designs made waves on runways across Asia. But when her business partner embezzled funds, everything collapsed. She withdrew, devastated. Her sewing machine collected dust. 2 years later, she began teaching sewing at a local shelter. The creativity returned slowly. Her designs now come from a different place, not ego, but empathy. I lost everything. But I found myself. And this version of me is exactly who the fashion world actually needed. Design was no longer her escape. It became her expression of resilience. 5. Kofi, pastor turned strategist, Ghana. After leaving his church due to burnout and internal conflict, Kwame swore he'd never lead again. He spent months in silence, working at a bookstore. One afternoon, a group of local business owners asked him to speak about value-driven leadership. He reluctantly agreed. That single session sparked a new journey. Kwame now advises social entrepreneurs across West Africa. I thought I was disqualified. God was simply redirecting me. Purpose doesn't die in the dark. It grows roots there. 6. Mai, tech innovator, Singapore. Mai led an AI startup that was years ahead of its time. Investors didn't understand her vision. Eventually, the company folded. Crushed, she moved back with her family and stopped coding altogether. 6 months later, she joined a volunteer group teaching coding to underserved youth. Watching a 14-year-old girl debug her first app reignited something inside. Maybe I wasn't building the wrong thing. Maybe I was building it in the wrong room. Sometimes you're not off track. You're just being rerouted to something deeper. 7. Elijah, poet and mental health advocate, USA. Elijah battled depression silently for years, even while touring as a spoken word artist. One night, he walked off stage mid-performance and disappeared for months. No social media. No shows. Just silence. But his DMs were still filled with messages. Your words saved me. That phrase haunted and healed him. Eventually, he returned not to perform, but to facilitate writing workshops for men struggling with identity and worth. I was never just a poet. I was a mirror. And mirrors can't reflect if they're broken. Healing makes the voice stronger. Silence doesn't erase purpose, it refines it. 8. Sophia, human rights lawyer, Brazil. After years of high-stakes cases and emotional exhaustion, Sophia walked away from international law. She lived anonymously in a coastal town, volunteering at a local school. One day, a teacher asked her to help a student whose parent had been wrongfully detained. That case opened a new path, community-based legal advocacy. I was hiding, but justice kept knocking. And eventually, I answered. When your calling won't leave you alone, it's no longer a career, it's a covenant. 9. Yusuf, educator, Sudan. A civil war had displaced Yusuf and shut down his school. He lived in a refugee camp, teaching a handful of children under a tree. It didn't feel like leadership. It felt like survival. Years later, a peace accord reopened the region. That same group of children had grown into young adults, and they began rebuilding the school, brick by brick. They told me, you didn't teach us subjects. You taught us how not to give up. Impact isn't always visible. Sometimes, it grows in silence and blooms in legacy. 10. Nia, brand architect, USA. Nia was a rising star in the branding world. Then her father died unexpectedly, and she spiraled into grief. For months, she barely left home. One night, she started sketching on old notebooks words, colors, shapes. She ended up designing a visual journal for people processing loss. Today, Grieve Loud is both a product and a movement. I thought I was hiding in pain. But I was actually incubating purpose. Some of the loudest revolutions start in whispered healing. These stories are reminders. Hiding is not the end of your story. It might be the sacred beginning. You're not buried. You're planted. And just like Moses, when the moment comes, a voice will whisper from the burning bush of your silence. You are still called. It's time to step out of hiding. The world is waiting. Strategic tool, The Hiding to Calling Map. Use this tool to trace your leadership origin story and reclaim your voice. 1. Identify your wilderness. What situation made you retreat, go quiet, or disappear? 2. Name the false narratives. What lies did you begin to believe about yourself in that season? 3. Spot the burning bush moments. Who or what reminded you that you still carry purpose? 4. Reframe the season. What did hiding form in you that success could never teach? 5. Define your next step. If you stopped hiding, what one act of obedience could you take this week? Print this. Write it down. Revisit it monthly. Because the journey out of hiding is never a one-time event. It's a lifelong rhythm of choosing courage over concealment. Reflection. What if this hiding has purpose? What space have you been hiding in, and why? Have you confused quietness with failure? What fear are you feeding that may be silencing your voice? What message, no matter how small, has recently reminded you of who you are? What would your life look like if you believed you were still called? Remember, the call of God doesn't expire because of fear, failure, or time. It waits until you're ready to hear it again. And once you do, everything changes. Chapter 2. When confidence fails and calling remains. Moses didn't just doubt the call, he doubted himself. I can't speak well. I'm not qualified. They won't believe me. Sound familiar? Every great leader wrestles with the voice of inadequacy. And often, it's not because the calling isn't clear, it's because our confidence has collapsed. In this chapter, we confront the myth that confidence must come first. Before God gave Moses miracles, he gave him a message: I will be with you. Not, you are good enough. Not, you'll figure it out. But I will go with you. God doesn't need your flawless confidence to fulfill his flawless call. That truth has the power to free you from imposter syndrome, from self-sabotage, and from the need to feel ready before saying yes. Confidence may fail, but calling doesn't. Because it's not rooted in how you feel about yourself, it's rooted in how God sees you. If you've ever stared at an open door and hesitated because of fear, this chapter is for you. If you've ever disqualified yourself before others could, this chapter is your mirror. If you've ever wanted to shrink back when God said step forward, this chapter is your wake-up call. Let's pull back the curtain on doubt. Let's deconstruct the lie that says you have to feel strong to be used greatly. And let's step into something deeper than confidence. Covenant. Because when God is with you, what can stand against you? Real stories. When confidence failed but calling spoke louder. 1. Vanessa, architect, South Africa. Vanessa was brilliant, but after a high-profile presentation failed due to a tech glitch, she began doubting her public speaking ability. She turned down major opportunities for nearly 2 years. Her confidence was fractured, and even casual team briefings triggered anxiety. A former mentor eventually reached out with a simple but powerful reminder: you're not on stage because you're perfect. You're there because what you carry helps people. She took the next speaking invitation with shaking hands and a racing heart. That keynote changed everything, not just for her, but for others in the room. I realized I don't need to be flawless to be impactful. I just need to be faithful. 2. Marcos, educator, Argentina. Marcos was passionate about teaching but froze the first time he was observed by administrators. He fumbled through his lesson, and the negative feedback shook him. He felt embarrassed, then unworthy. 4 years, he stayed in assistant roles, avoiding leadership opportunities. One day, he heard a struggling student say, "You're the only one who makes this make sense." That sentence pierced through his self-doubt. That moment reframed his fear. It wasn't about impressing superiors. It was about serving students. That changed everything. I stopped performing and started connecting. 3. Chidinma, NGO founder, Nigeria. Chidinma launched a girls' empowerment nonprofit with bold vision but little funding. After stumbling during a pitch at a government meeting and being laughed at, she stopped attending events altogether. Shame silenced her. A friend noticed and challenged her. Even when your voice shakes, speak. She pushed herself back into rooms she once feared. Today, her organization has impacted over 50,000 girls across West Africa. Confidence didn't return overnight. Calling just got louder and I had to obey the louder voice. 4. Ethan, startup CTO, USA. Brilliant with code but painfully shy, Ethan dreaded pitching to investors. After one particularly awkward meeting where he forgot key talking points, he nearly quit. His co-founder stepped in not to criticize, but to coach. "Don't try to perform," he said. "Try to connect." That advice anchored Ethan through awkward beginnings. Eventually, he found his rhythm not as a showman, but as a storyteller. Confidence failed me often. But conviction gave me a reason to stay. Purpose doesn't need polish, it needs presence. 5. Salma, documentary filmmaker, Egypt. Salma's debut film received scathing reviews. The criticism cut deep, and she shelved her camera. She doubted her storytelling instincts. But while volunteering in a rural village, she witnessed a widow raise 5 children alone through handmade crafts. The world needed to see this, she realized. She picked up her camera not to prove herself, but to spotlight stories that matter. It wasn't about being good enough. It was about telling the story that needed to be told. And that freed me. 6. Luca, youth pastor, Italy. Luca loved ministering to youth but had a long-standing fear of speaking to adults. When invited to preach on Sunday, he almost said no. He spent nights rehearsing and deleting his notes. Then he remembered what a mentor once said, "You're not responsible for being perfect. You're responsible for showing up." He showed up. Voice shaking. Heart pounding. But the message landed. That day taught me that presence, not perfection, is what people connect to. And that's all God asks for. 7. Rina, tech product manager, Japan. Rina developed an app to help visually impaired users navigate digital content, but her social anxiety crippled her. Every presentation felt like a panic attack waiting to happen. Her coach guided her through breathing techniques and grounding exercises, but more importantly, reframed her mindset. Courage is showing up scared and doing it anyway. Her first pitch wasn't polished, but it was passionate. Investors saw heart and potential. I still get nervous. But nerves don't negate purpose. They remind me I'm doing something meaningful. 8. Donnell, political candidate, USA. Donnell stepped into the political arena to fight for marginalized communities. But his first live debate was a disaster. He froze, forgot his points, and faced online ridicule. He almost withdrew his candidacy. Then a woman from his district emailed, "We still need your voice even if it trembles." That message reignited his fire. He refined his message, stayed in the race, and eventually won. Confidence is a wave. Calling is a rock. I anchor to the rock every time I speak now. 9. Hannah, worship leader, South Korea. Hannah's voice was anointed, but stage fright haunted her. One Sunday, while leading worship, she broke down mid-song and ran off stage. She assumed it would be her last time leading. But the congregation didn't reject her, they thanked her. That moment of brokenness opened a deeper authenticity in her ministry. They didn't need a perfect performance. They needed a real heart. I now train others not to perform, but to be present with God. 10. Thabo, civil engineer, Botswana. A failed infrastructure project nearly cost Thabo his career. He was sued, scrutinized, and spiraled into self-doubt. In meetings, he stayed quiet. In life, he shrank. A mentor took him aside and said, "A mistake doesn't mean you've lost your gift. It means you've got new wisdom." Thabo slowly re-engaged. He began mentoring junior engineers, sharing both successes and failures. It took time to rebuild confidence. But my calling had never left, it was waiting for me to believe again. These are real lives, not fairy tales. Because real leaders don't always feel qualified. They just refuse to quit. Your confidence may be shaken. But your calling is still sound. You may not feel worthy. But worthiness was never the requirement. When God calls, He doesn't ask if you feel ready. He just says, "Go." Strategic tool. The confidence checking grid. Use this tool to assess where you are and remind yourself that even broken confidence can walk boldly. 1. Where am I hiding behind insecurity? List 2 areas where fear is louder than faith. 2. Where has someone affirmed my impact even when I felt weak? Name the encouragement you're tempted to forget. 3. What decision would I make if I believed I was already enough? Write it down. Say it out loud. 4. Where am I waiting to feel confident before I move? Hint: that's probably where God is waiting, too. 5. What can I do today that doesn't require full confidence, but does require full obedience? Reflection: when did I start believing I had to be perfect to be called? What does confidence mean to you? Where did you learn that? Have you ever said no to something you knew you were meant to do because of fear? What voices, internal or external, are still shaping how you see your worth? When was the last time you felt unqualified, but someone reminded you of your value? What would your leadership look like if you led from trust instead of fear? Let this chapter remind you: you're not leading because you're perfect. You're leading because you're called. Confidence may fail, but calling remains. And that's more than enough. Chapter 3: The burn that won't go out. There's a fire that doesn't consume. It doesn't scorch the skin or blacken the sky. It burns quietly, consistently. Not to destroy, but to draw you in. That's the kind of fire Moses saw in the wilderness. A bush that blazed and beckoned. Not to entertain, but to commission. God still speaks through fire. You know the feeling. The fire you can't explain. A burden you can't shake. A restlessness that doesn't leave when the world goes quiet. That's the burn of calling. This is not ambition. It's not ego. It's not hustle culture. It's holy. It's the sacred tension between I can't stay here and I'm scared to move. Moses didn't go looking for God. But God went looking for him. And he found him through fire. There will always be reasons to stay in hiding. Comfort. Fear. Regret. Shame. But once the bush starts burning, once the fire speaks your name, you can never truly go back to ordinary. God doesn't light fires for decoration. He lights them for direction. And when your name echoes through the flame, the only right response is the one Moses gave. Here I am. In this chapter, we explore what it means to carry the kind of fire that won't go out. How to steward it. How to obey it. And how to walk toward it even when everything in you wants to run. Because when you carry fire, you don't get to be passive. You get to be transformed. And when you say yes to the fire, you say yes to the future. 10 real stories. 1. Caleb, software developer, Kenya. Caleb worked in fintech, but he was restless. Every product he built felt hollow. During the pandemic, he volunteered to help local schools build virtual classrooms. That project changed him. He found himself staying up late, not for pay, but because something burned. What started as a simple gesture of help became a revelation of purpose. He realized technology could be more than profitable. It could be redemptive. He eventually left his job and launched an edtech platform reaching thousands of students. This isn't just code anymore. It's calling. The burn wouldn't let me go. 2. Naomi, marketing director, Canada. Naomi was successful by every metric. Salary, title, recognition. But a quiet unease followed her. A conference on ethical storytelling ignited something in her. She couldn't unhear the stories of those exploited for campaigns. The glamour of her career no longer comforted her conscience. She resigned. Took a sabbatical. Then started her own agency focused on equity and impact. The fire disrupted my comfort. But it gave me back my conscience. 3. Hakeem, music producer, UAE. Hakeem had chart-topping hits, but little peace. One night, while helping a teen record a spoken word project for a school, he was moved to tears. The rawness, the truth, it lit a spark he hadn't felt in years. That moment reminded him why he fell in love with music in the first place, to tell stories that matter. He reoriented his studio to uplift emerging voices with real stories. I used to chase the charts. Now I chase the flame. 4. Freya, nurse, Sweden. Freya had always loved healthcare, but burnout made her question everything. She found herself on the verge of walking away from her career. During a rural medical mission trip, She held a mother's hand as she delivered her child in silence and courage. Something sacred happened in that moment, an ignition. That moment burned something into her. She pivoted into trauma-informed midwifery and advocacy. That fire showed up in the middle of my exhaustion and gave me a reason to stay. 5. Zubair, activist, Pakistan. Zubair was an academic, comfortable with papers and publications. But a brutal case of injustice in his city lit a different fire. He joined a protest not to lead, but to listen. He couldn't sleep for days afterward. The more he learned, the more he felt convicted to act. He co-founded a civil rights group that now advises lawmakers. I didn't plan to step in. But when the fire calls you by name, you don't argue. You answer. 6. Rachel, chef, Australia. Rachel ran a high-end bistro. But she found herself haunted by the waste and exclusion in the industry. A workshop on food insecurity planted a seed and a spark. She could no longer pretend luxury dining was enough. The tension grew into transformation. She left fine dining and launched a non-profit kitchen serving dignified meals to underserved communities. The burn wasn't loud. It was steady. And it changed everything. 7. Arjun, tech ethics advisor, India. Arjun had been working in AI without questioning much until a report surfaced about bias in an algorithm he helped develop. Guilt hit. But more than that, conviction. He stayed up researching ethics, user equity, and transparency. The fire started from failure, but it refined his purpose. He transitioned into a watchdog role, educating developers about ethical tech. That fire came from failure. But it led me into purpose. 8. Lara, high school principal, UK. Lara enjoyed her job, but she couldn't shake the feeling that marginalized students were being pushed aside. A student's tearful breakdown during a one-on-one conversation ignited something in her. She realized her position gave her access, but she hadn't been using it to fight systemic gaps. She launched a student empowerment initiative that is now being adopted nationwide. The fire didn't ask for permission. It just showed up. I'm glad I listened. 9. Miguel, urban planner, Colombia. Miguel thought he'd build skyscrapers. But an internship in a neglected district shifted his dream. The broken infrastructure wasn't just inefficient, it was inhumane. Children without sidewalks. Seniors without ramps. Families without water. He decided to design for justice instead of prestige. I wanted legacy, but the fire led me to compassion. Now I build for people, not applause. 10. Grace, theology student, USA. Grace planned to teach in seminaries. But during a prison ministry visit, an inmate asked her, "Do you think God remembers people like me?" That question lit a lifelong flame. Her theology collided with reality. Classroom debates couldn't hold a candle to the urgency of proximity. She now leads restorative justice programs across correctional facilities. The fire wasn't about preaching, it was about proximity. And I'll never turn away from it again. These stories are more than inspiring. They're revealing. Because when God lights a fire in your life, it's never random. It's always redemptive. You might not feel ready. You might still feel small. But the fire doesn't pick the qualified. It qualifies the called. The burn may start as discomfort, as restlessness, as holy frustration. But left unignored, it becomes movement. Not toward applause, but toward alignment. Fire is not chaos. It's clarity. It consumes distraction and reveals direction. You're not being punished. You're being positioned. Let it burn. Strategic tool, the fire discernment framework. When passion feels heavy or purpose feels unclear, use this tool to identify where divine restlessness might be calling you forward. 1. What keeps tugging at my spirit? What thought, burden, or vision keeps returning, especially in stillness? What won't let me go, even when I try to ignore it? 2. Where am I stirred, not just emotionally, but spiritually? What moments move me beyond excitement and into conviction? Where do I sense the nudge of the Spirit, not just the noise of ambition? 3. What injustice or story keeps me awake? What issue breaks my heart or fuels a holy frustration? Where do I feel both anger and assignment? 4. If I weren't afraid, where would I run toward? What would I pursue if failure wasn't a threat? What bold move is buried beneath my excuses? 5. Who keeps showing up and why? Are certain people, conversations, or mentors appearing repeatedly? Could God be speaking direction through unexpected voices? 6. Where am I uncomfortable but still faithful? What space feels stretching, but not compromising? Could discomfort be revealing deeper alignment, not disobedience? 7. What dream refuses to die? What vision do I keep trying to downplay, but it keeps resurfacing? What's been buried but won't stay silent? Reflection. When has God lit a fire in you? What have you been trying to ignore that won't go away? Are you more afraid of failing or of burning for nothing? Where is God inviting you to say, "Here I am"? What would change if you stopped explaining the fire and started following it? When you look back, can you see the pattern of divine disruption? Who needs the version of you that walks boldly into the flame? Remember, this fire won't consume you. It will commission you. It's not meant to burn you out. It's meant to burn within. Let the bush blaze. Let your heart burn. And when the fire calls your name, don't negotiate. Just answer. Here I am. Chapter 4. You can't skip the desert. Moses didn't meet God in a palace. He met him in a wilderness. Not when he was powerful, but when he was broken. Not when he was influential, but when he was invisible. There are things the desert teaches that the mountaintop never can. We hate the wilderness. We fight it, curse it, pray it away. But the desert is not the enemy of destiny. It is the forge of it. The desert strips. It reveals. It confronts every false layer of identity and demands the kind of surrender that can't be faked. It's where applause is replaced with silence and where that silence becomes sacred. The wilderness doesn't just take things from you. It gives things to you. Stillness. Honesty. Insight. Resilience. Things the spotlight can never form, and applause can never sustain. You can't rush the desert. You can't fake your way through it. You can't shortcut the formation. You can't skip the desert. This chapter is for every leader who's in the middle of obscurity. For everyone who feels like they've been delayed, detoured, or dismissed. For those whose prayers feel like echoes and whose visions feel stuck in the sand. You're not stuck. You're being shaped. Because before God gave Moses a staff to part seas, he gave him a staff to tend sheep. Before Moses confronted Pharaoh, he had to confront himself, his doubt, his past, his silence. And before Moses led a nation, he had to learn to lead in silence, with no audience, for years. The wilderness was not a detour. It was divine design. This chapter will reframe the desert. From a place of punishment to a place of preparation. From obscurity to obedience. From delay to deepening. Because when you finally emerge from the wilderness, you won't be the same. You'll be ready. You'll be refined. You'll be real. Real stories. The desert season that changed everything. 1. Emmanuel, accountant turned advocate, Nigeria. Emmanuel lost his high-paying job after a whistleblowing incident. What started as integrity ended in isolation. 4 months, he battled depression and rejection. Former friends stopped calling. He doubted everything about himself. He took up a volunteer role at a small literacy center. Every day felt mundane, but slowly, purpose emerged. He began teaching financial literacy to kids in underserved areas and helping parents understand basic budgets. I thought I was in exile. But I was in training. The desert healed what ambition had damaged. What I thought was a breakdown became a breakthrough. 2. Sarah, engineer, UK. Sarah had everything mapped out: engineering degree, high-paying job, dream projects. But after a failed project and burnout, she resigned. She moved home, isolated and aimless, ashamed to face colleagues. In the quiet, she started journaling. That journal became a blog. The blog became a podcast. She started sharing openly about burnout and mental health in corporate life. The desert gave me back my voice. I didn't find my purpose in the spotlight, I found it in solitude. Now I speak with more power because I know what silence taught me. 3. Jamal, former athlete, USA. A career-ending injury ended Jamal's dream overnight. One day he was a rising star, the next, forgotten. He spiraled. Rehab was slow, and the silence screamed. But during one visit to a youth detention center, something clicked. A boy said, "You get it. You know what it's like to be dropped." His story mattered. He began mentoring. The desert wasn't where I lost my life. It's where I found my mission. My influence didn't end with my career, it started with my pain. 4. Dami, fashion retailer, Ghana. Dami's successful chain of stores was wiped out in an economic crash. She lost not just her business, but her identity. Broke and embarrassed, she moved back in with family. Depression lingered. In that season, she started handcrafting garments as therapy. Friends began ordering. A new business rooted in story and soul was born. The wilderness humbled me. But it also reintroduced me to my creativity. It gave me fashion with compassion. 5. Julian, former pastor, Australia. Julian stepped down from ministry after burnout and personal loss. He felt disqualified. He disappeared for a year, no social media, no sermons. He gardened. He cooked. He breathed. The wilderness stripped his identity from performance and applause. In the stillness, God spoke not in a roar, but in a whisper. Julian now mentors pastors in transition. The desert didn't silence my calling. It detoxed my soul. I became a shepherd again, not of crowds, but of hearts. 6. Anika, tech project manager, India. After a bitter breakup and a toxic work environment, Anika left everything. She volunteered at a monastery, expecting peace. Instead, she faced herself, her ego, her wounds, her fears. No gadgets. No meetings. Just stillness. But something beautiful happened in that raw honesty. She started designing tech for wellness and mindfulness. Tools for slow living in a fast world. I couldn't design clarity for others until I found it in myself. The desert gave me that. 7. Theo, academic, South Africa. Theo's research was discredited after a scandal he didn't cause. His credibility vanished. Universities stopped calling. He spent months hiking alone, documenting species. He thought he was hiding from shame, but he was walking into clarity. That solitude turned into a best-selling nature memoir. His words reached more people than his papers ever had. The silence was deafening. But it made room for a new kind of voice to rise. One rooted in wonder, not reputation. 8. Minute, chef, South Korea. Minute left a toxic job and didn't cook for 6 months. She wandered between cities, unsure of what was next. A street food vendor in a remote town reignited her love for cooking. Watching them feed a neighborhood with joy reminded her why she started. Now, Minute runs a culinary school for immigrant women. My identity was never in titles. The desert stripped the titles so I could see the truth. I didn't lose myself, I recovered her. 9. Oswald, journalist, Germany. A lawsuit ended Oswald's media career. Overnight, he went from public thought leader to silent bystander. In therapy, he rediscovered storytelling not for ratings, but for redemption. He started writing anonymously. Letters. Essays. Prayers. His voice reached deeper than ever. The wilderness didn't end my influence. It purified it. I found truth again without the pressure to perform. 10. Priya, non-profit leader, USA India. After years of activism, Priya burned out. She couldn't pray. Couldn't lead. She traveled to India and worked in an orphanage quietly, away from attention. She folded laundry, washed dishes, and read bedtime stories. In the daily routines, joy returned. Simplicity became sacred. Now, she teaches leaders to serve from overflow, not obligation. My desert taught me, you're not useful because you're busy. You're powerful because you're present. Strategic tool, the Desert Formation Map. Use this tool to make meaning from your wilderness. Let your formation become visible. 1. Identify the wilderness. Where have you felt lost, delayed, or invisible? 2. Name the stripping. What identity, comfort, or crutch was removed? 3. Discover the voice. In silence, what truth began to rise? 4. Spot the formation. What new strengths or clarity have emerged? 5. Honor the journey. What has the desert given that comfort never could? 6. Declare your return. What will you carry from the wilderness into the world? Reflection. What if the desert is your doorway? What season have you been calling delay that might actually be preparation? Where has God stripped away distractions, and what has been revealed? What parts of you feel dead but might only be buried? What fruit has emerged from your wilderness? What would shift if you believed this obscurity had a purpose? Who might be waiting for the version of you that's forged, not just formed, in the desert? Let this chapter remind you. The desert is not your defeat. It's your discipleship. And when God leads you through it, He always leads you out of it with more than you brought in. Don't skip the desert. It's where the real leader in you is born. Part 2. Systems and Setbacks, Leading in Complexity Without Losing Yourself. Covers chapters 5 through 8. Deliverance is holy, but it's also messy. This is where the call becomes confrontation. Where the assignment turns public. Where the work begins, not just in your soul, but in the system. Part 2 is for leaders who've said yes, but didn't expect it to be this complicated. You're navigating bureaucracy, betrayal, burnout, and the very people you're trying to help are now blaming you for their discomfort. You're facing broken structures that resist change, and colleagues who don't see what you see. You're leading a team, a business, a movement, and you're wondering, why does this cost so much? These chapters won't offer easy answers, but they will give you the tools to move forward with conviction, wisdom, and sustainability. You'll learn how to speak truth to power without losing your peace. Lead people who are not ready to be free. Delegate without guilt. Stay rooted in God when the pressure to perform is relentless. This is the terrain where many leaders get tired, or bitter, or quietly quit while still keeping their title. But not you. Not here. This is where leadership gets tested and purified. If you've ever whispered, "I didn't sign up for this," or silently questioned if you can keep going, these chapters will feel like a mirror and a map. Because Moses didn't just walk through the Red Sea, he walked through relentless resistance, daily disappointment, and impossible decisions. And he still led. So will you. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to stay faithful. Let's keep going. Chapter 5. Let my people go without losing your voice. Every generation has its Pharaoh. Every leader has a moment when they must speak truth to power, when silence becomes betrayal, and obedience means confrontation. For Moses, that moment came when God told him to return to Egypt, look Pharaoh in the face, and declare a message that could cost him everything. Let my people go. This wasn't a marketing pitch. It wasn't a polite suggestion. It was a prophetic demand rooted in heaven's authority. And yet, it came through the mouth of a man who once stuttered. A man who doubted his own voice. A man who had failed before and fled in shame. Leadership often places us in the paradox of bold calling and fragile confidence. But when God sends you, He also speaks through you. This chapter is about reclaiming your voice, not the polished, perfect version, but the real, redeemed one. The voice that trembles and still tells the truth. The voice that might not echo through halls of power but shakes foundations because it's rooted in justice and backed by heaven. You might be called to speak to systems. To confront injustice. To challenge corruption. To call for deliverance not just for people, but for entire structures. But here's the tension. How do you challenge power without becoming corrupted by it? How do you confront Pharaoh without losing your peace? How do you speak boldly and remain deeply grounded? This chapter explores what it means to lead courageously in complex, political, or oppressive systems without compromising your values, identity, or faith. Because true leadership doesn't scream to be heard. It speaks with authority because it has been sent. And when you speak with God's voice, even Pharaoh has to listen. Real stories, when leaders spoke and systems shifted. 1. Angela, HR executive, Germany. Angela had worked her way up in a multinational corporation, navigating challenges as both a woman and a person of color. When she discovered that promotion rates for women of color lagged drastically behind their peers, she felt torn. She feared rocking the boat, losing hard-won respect, or being labeled as divisive. For months, she debated, speak or stay silent. But a sleepless night and a quiet prayer clarified the cost of complicity. She compiled the data, requested a meeting, and voice trembling laid the truth before the board. The confrontation was uncomfortable, but it sparked overdue change. Speaking up nearly cost me my career. But staying silent would have cost me my integrity, and that price was too high. 2. Kwesi, civil servant, Ghana. Kwesi believed in serving his country with honor, but working in the Land Registry Department exposed him to widespread corruption. When he uncovered illegal land deals benefiting wealthy elites, colleagues warned him, "Don't make it your problem." But Kwesi couldn't look away. He submitted evidence through official channels, knowing retaliation might follow. His reassignment came swiftly, a quiet sidelining. Yet the leak reached journalists, leading to a national exposé and eventually, reform. Kwesi stayed mostly behind the scenes, but his courage set the wheels in motion. I wasn't loud. I was loyal to truth. And truth traveled further than fear ever could. 3. Priyanka, journalist, India. Assigned to cover a celebrity scandal, Priyanka's investigation took an unexpected turn when she stumbled onto a network exploiting vulnerable children. Her editor urged her to focus on the assignment and avoid unprovable claims. But Priyanka's conscience wouldn't let her rest. Late nights became early mornings as she gathered evidence and verified leads. Unable to publish through official channels, she leaked the story anonymously. The result: national investigations, arrests, and lives saved from unimaginable harm. My voice wasn't welcome, but it was needed. Sometimes you don't speak to be liked. You speak to liberate, and that's enough. 4. Devin, non-profit director, USA. Devin had dedicated his life to amplifying the stories of marginalized communities. When key funders began pressuring him to adjust messaging, making it safer and more marketable to attract bigger donations, he faced a painful choice. Would he dilute the truth to keep the lights on? Or risk financial loss to stay faithful to the mission? He chose integrity, even as some funders withdrew. But what he lost in dollars, he gained in depth of impact. The communities he served trusted him more, and new partnerships emerged, ones that valued authenticity over appeasement. If your voice is for sale, your leadership is too. I chose truth over applause. 5. Zara, architect, UAE. Zara was proud to contribute to major projects that shaped her city's skyline. But when she was asked to approve a lucrative project that flouted environmental regulations, she knew saying no could endanger her career. Developers offered subtle bribes, contractors threatened lawsuits. Still, she refused to sign off. Her firm stood by her despite pressure. The project stalled, went through revisions, and emerged compliant. The experience solidified Zara's commitment to ethical design and earned her quiet respect in an industry where compromise was the norm. I didn't yell. I didn't fight dirty. I just didn't bend. And that was enough. 6. Leo, high school teacher, Brazil. Leo taught history in a region where political tensions often spilled into classrooms. When a student asked about an event the government preferred to erase from memory, Leo felt the room freeze. He could have deflected. He could have stayed safe. But instead, he answered honestly, presenting facts and encouraging respectful dialogue. Parents complained. Administrators warned him. But students began asking deeper questions, engaging critically with their world. Leo endured scrutiny, but he also witnessed young minds awakening to the power of truth. I didn't raise my voice. I raised awareness. And that's how change begins. 7. Farah, city planner, Canada. Farah reviewed a redevelopment plan that would modernize a district, but at the cost of displacing hundreds of low-income families. The path of least resistance was to sign off quietly. But Farah couldn't. She organized community meetings, gathered feedback, and proposed alternatives. The process delayed the project and invited criticism, but ultimately produced a plan that balanced renewal with justice. Farah's courage earned her both detractors and allies, but she never regretted choosing equity over expediency. Leadership is not doing what's easy. It's doing what's just even when no one claps. 8. Omar, Imam, Jordan. Domestic violence had become a whispered crisis in Omar's community. When urged by other leaders to avoid sensitive topics from the pulpit, Omar wrestled with the cost of silence. One evening, moved by conviction, he addressed it head-on in his sermon, offering support to victims and challenging abusers. The backlash came swiftly: accusations of divisiveness, veiled threats. But so did the thank yous, from survivors, from families, from those desperate for the issue to be named. The pulpit isn't for popularity. It's for prophetic responsibility. And I won't waste that responsibility on comfort. 9. Cassidy, nurse, New Zealand. Cassidy worked in maternity care and couldn't ignore the patterns. Women from marginalized communities experienced worse outcomes, received less support, and faced implicit bias daily. She presented her findings to hospital leadership, only to be met with deflection. Refusing to let the issue die in boardrooms, Cassidy went public, giving voice to those who felt invisible. Her courage stirred national debate and catalyzed changes in policy and practice that saved lives. I didn't shout to be radical. I spoke to be righteous. Sometimes, righteousness is the loudest sound of all. 10. Solomon, pastor, Kenya. As elections neared, tribal divisions threatened to rip Solomon's congregation apart. Preaching unity was dangerous, silence would have been safer. But Sunday after Sunday, he chose to speak the hard truth, that faith must be stronger than faction, that love must be louder than loyalty to tribe. Some left his church. Others sent threats. But seeds of healing took root, and small acts of reconciliation began to bloom. Let my people go doesn't just mean leaving Egypt. It means leaving division, fear, and hate. And I'll never stop saying it. Strategic tool, voice alignment strategic framework. To move from reflection to action, consider applying the voice alignment strategic framework. Begin by identifying where you're tempted to stay silent just to keep the peace. For example, this might arise in settings like team meetings where speaking up feels risky. Once you name the situation, commit to a specific action, such as raising that important topic in your next meeting. To stay accountable, share your intention with a trusted mentor and review how it went afterward. Next, consider what truth burns inside you that still needs to be spoken. Perhaps you've noticed bias in hiring decisions but haven't voiced it yet. A tangible step would be to draft talking points and present them to your leadership team. To ensure follow-through, set a date for that crucial conversation. Ask yourself where you need to speak not for attention, but for alignment with your deepest values. For instance, maybe you're uneasy about the ethical direction of a project. Your action could be to write and share a values statement with your team, clarifying what you stand for. To stay grounded, ask a colleague you trust for feedback on how your words were received. Reflect on who needs to hear your voice right now and honestly consider what it might cost you. This could involve preparing for a hard conversation with your board or senior leaders. The action here is booking the meeting and getting ready to speak with clarity and courage. Afterwards, debrief with an advisor or mentor to process the outcome and refine your approach. Finally, imagine what it would look like to speak prophetically while still walking in peace. Perhaps this means staying calm under fire when tensions rise. One way to prepare is to draft personal affirmations and rehearse challenging conversations in advance. After key moments, take time to journal about what happened, noting where you grew and where you want to grow next. Reflection: what have you been afraid to say? Where are you using silence as self-protection? When did you last feel your voice tremble and keep speaking anyway? What has God placed on your heart that others might resist? Are you speaking to be accepted or to set others free? Let this chapter remind you. Your voice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true. And when heaven backs your voice, even Pharaoh has to listen. Speak. Even if it costs you. Because liberation depends on it. Let my people go. Chapter 6. The people you're called to will still complain. They cried out for freedom. But when it arrived wrapped in discomfort, they complained. This is one of the hardest truths every leader must face. The very people you're called to help might criticize you for how help arrives. Moses knew this intimately. He risked his life to stand before Pharaoh, then returned to face a community that questioned his every move. They grumbled at the Red Sea. They muttered about manna. They idolized Egypt when they should have trusted God. And through it all, Moses remained faithful. The leadership tension no one warns you about. You will liberate people. And they will miss their chains. You will build systems to bless them. And they will complain it's not enough. You will sacrifice sleep, sanity, and safety for their good. And still be misunderstood. This is what it means to lead people through process, not perfection. And the more transformative your leadership is, the more resistance you may feel. The wilderness always reveals what Egypt masked. And in that revelation, you will hear noise. Fear disguised as frustration. Trauma masked as entitlement. Pain voiced as complaint. But don't let the noise distract you from your assignment. You're not called to please them. You're called to deliver them. Real stories, when leaders faced complaints and kept going. 1. Size, fintech founder, South Africa. When Size launched a digital lending platform aimed at unbanked rural communities, the goal was financial access. But rollout was rocky. Poor network coverage delayed transactions, and repayment reminders were misinterpreted as harassment. Community leaders accused him of exploitation. Former allies withdrew. Size was crushed. He considered shutting the platform down until a widow sent a handwritten note. "Your app helped me start a chicken farm. I can feed my children now." He stayed the course, refined the tech, and hired local agents for support. Even when those you help complain, it doesn't mean the work isn't worth doing. 2. Amira, education reform strategist, Egypt. Amira spearheaded a national pilot to modernize public school curriculums with a focus on creativity and critical thinking. Parents were outraged. This isn't real learning, some said. Teachers, overwhelmed by new expectations, threatened walkouts. Media outlets called the reform chaotic. Amira was devastated. But she refused to retreat. She doubled down on training, added parental engagement workshops, and kept pressing. A decade later, her model is the foundation for Egypt's new education blueprint. People resist what they don't understand, especially when they're used to dysfunction. 3. Kevin, product manager, USA. Kevin led a software team tasked with overhauling a legacy system for a healthcare provider. The new system was faster, more secure, and compliant. But staff hated it. "Why can't we just keep the old version?" they asked. "This makes our jobs harder." Productivity dropped. Support tickets piled up. Executives panicked. But Kevin stayed calm. He increased hands-on training, gathered feedback, and gave the rollout more breathing room. Within months, satisfaction scores rose. "I learned that innovation often feels like inconvenience until it proves its value." 4. Hafsat, gender equity advocate, Nigeria. Hafsat launched a campaign in northern Nigeria to educate girls about reproductive health and consent. Within weeks, religious and community leaders accused her of promoting immorality. Billboards were torn down. Her team received threats. Parents withdrew their daughters from sessions. Heartbroken, Hafsat regrouped. She enlisted trusted female elders as local ambassadors and reframed the curriculum with culturally sensitive language. Resistance didn't vanish, but impact grew. Freedom often starts with backlash. But silence doesn't save lives. Conviction does. 5. Sebastian, urban planner, Germany. Sebastian led a green mobility project to reduce car traffic in Berlin's inner city by 40%. The plan included expanded bike lanes and reduced parking. Chaos followed. Shop owners complained about delivery delays. Elderly residents protested. Newspapers branded him a green dictator. He offered town halls, created delivery hubs, and piloted shuttle options for seniors. Over time, pollution dropped, walking increased, and businesses adapted. Today, the district is a model for sustainable urban design. People will fight even the future that benefits them, because loss often feels louder than gain. 6. Zhou, Manufacturing Director, China. Zhou implemented safer working conditions in her factory, including mandatory breaks and better air filtration. Productivity dropped temporarily. Middle managers complained. Corporate HQ threatened her with budget cuts. Some workers even resisted, fearing the changes would lead to layoffs. Zhou stood her ground. She educated her staff on the long-term benefits. Within a year, injuries dropped by 60%, morale soared, and output surpassed pre-reform levels. When you challenge toxic normalcy, expect complaint. But if you persist, trust is earned. 7. Mateo, Political Reformer, Argentina. As a young city councilman, Mateo introduced a transparency ordinance requiring public reporting of all municipal contracts. Colleagues mocked him. "You'll make enemies," they warned. Contractors lobbied against him. Even some citizens complained, "It's just more bureaucracy." But after the first report exposed inflated bids and saved the city millions, opinions shifted. Mateo won re-election by a landslide. People may resent the process that protects them until they see what it saves them from. 8. Layla, Humanitarian Logistics Coordinator, Syria. Layla coordinated food and medicine supply routes in war-affected areas. Delays were inevitable. Conditions were harsh. When rations were late, local communities turned on her. "You promised relief," they said. Some threatened to bar her team from future aid drops. But Layla didn't abandon the mission. She redirected communication, added local liaisons, and rebuilt trust. Her resilience kept thousands alive. In crisis, pain has no filter. But leadership means loving people through their accusations. 9. Daniel, Diversity Officer, UK. Daniel was hired to lead DEI efforts in a large financial firm. His audits revealed pay gaps and hiring disparities. When he presented his findings, executives bristled. Colleagues dismissed him. "You're exaggerating the issue," some said. Others avoided him entirely. Instead of retreating, Daniel hosted roundtables, invited uncomfortable conversations, and proposed metrics with business incentives. 2 years later, the firm earned national recognition for inclusive leadership. Sometimes the people who asked for change will hate how it arrives. Lead anyway. 10. Chiamaka, Social Entrepreneur, Ghana. Chiamaka founded a digital agriculture platform connecting rural farmers to urban buyers. When the platform launched, farmers complained about app complexity. City buyers doubted product quality. Her inbox was flooded with frustration. Investors questioned her model. She paused, hired local agents to train farmers, and created a trust verification system. 6 months later, the marketplace was thriving. Every visionary will be doubted by the very people they're trying to serve. The key is to serve anyway. Strategic tool, the complaint compass. When the noise of criticism grows loud, use this compass to stay grounded in clarity. 1. Don't personalize what's process. Is their complaint truly about you or about the disruption of their comfort? 2. Distinguish loud voices from lasting impact. Who's loudest now may not reflect who will be helped most later. 3. Return to your why. Go back to the burden that birthed the vision. Remind yourself why you began. 4. Invite dialogue without apology. You don't owe everyone agreement, but clarity and compassion matter. 5. Lead with presence, not performance. You're not performing for applause. You're present for purpose. Reflection. Can you lead through complaint? Where have I been wounded by the very people I wanted to serve? Have I equated resistance with rejection? What might their complaints actually reveal about their fears? What would Moses do in my situation? What would future impact say to present discouragement? You're not called to avoid discomfort. You're called to carry deliverance. They may not thank you now. They may even oppose you. But like Moses, your legacy will not be measured by compliments, it will be measured by your consistency. Let them complain. Let them misunderstand. Let them grumble. And still lead them forward. Chapter 7. leadership fatigue and the Jethro principle. Moses was tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the deep, soul-worn fatigue that comes from trying to do too much for too many with too little support. From dawn till dusk, he judged the people. Every decision, every complaint, every conflict landed at his feet. And though his heart was full of purpose, his hands were full of pressure. His calling was sacred, but his strategy was unsustainable. That's when Jethro stepped in. Moses' father-in-law watched him lead for one day and said something that echoes across centuries. "What you are doing is not good. You will surely wear yourself out." Exodus 18 verse 17. That wasn't a rebuke, it was a rescue. Jethro wasn't criticizing Moses' heart. He was confronting his structure. Moses didn't have a leadership problem, he had a logistics problem. He was trying to carry a nation on the strength of a single man. And no matter how spiritual your mission is, God never intended for it to be sustained by isolation. Even miracles require management. Even prophets need processes. Even visionaries need structure. The slow burn of overresponsibility. Leadership fatigue doesn't always start loud. It begins in the small compromises, skipping rest, ignoring red flags, micromanaging because you fear loss. You tell yourself you're serving, when really you're shouldering what God never asked you to carry alone. Over time, the weight turns sacred work into soul strain. Yes, leadership is costly. But burnout is not a spiritual badge. It's a warning. Even Jesus, the Son of God, rested, delegated, and withdrew often. Why should we think we're stronger? Calling does not cancel capacity. And purpose must be partnered with structure, or it collapses. The Jethro principle. Jethro offered Moses more than critique, he offered a blueprint. Select capable men from all the people, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Exodus 18 verse 21. In modern terms, Jethro's strategy includes 1. Discern leadership capacity. Not everyone can carry everything, but someone can carry something. 2. Empower with trust. Authority without micromanagement. 3. Reserve yourself for the irreplaceable. Moses only handled what only Moses could handle. This wasn't just delegation. It was liberation for both Moses and the people. The Jethro principle teaches us that you don't have to choose between excellence and endurance. Structure doesn't dilute anointing, it protects it. You're not failing by building systems. You're thriving. You're making sure the vision outlives your fatigue. Real stories, when leaders learned to let go. 1. Nihar, tech founder, India. Nihar launched a digital health startup that exploded in growth. But she insisted on reviewing every product, pitch, and code push. Her team felt suffocated. Her family felt invisible. A panic attack during a board meeting forced her to face the truth: she wasn't scalable. She restructured, hired strategic leads, and stepped into visionary-only roles. Delegation didn't dilute my leadership, it clarified it. I stopped being a bottleneck and became a builder again. 2. Daniel, pastor, USA. Daniel led a thriving megachurch, but his calendar was chaos. Sermons, counseling, budget meetings, hospital visits. One night, his young daughter said, "Daddy, do you love the church more than me?" That moment unraveled him. He wept and rebuilt. He empowered a pastoral care team and took Fridays off to be dad. I was preaching about rest while living in exhaustion. I needed to obey my own sermons. 3. Leah, non-profit director, Ethiopia. Leah's youth empowerment NGO gained national praise. But turnover was high because her team couldn't breathe. She admitted, "I was afraid if I let go, it would all fall apart." A consultant helped her decentralize leadership and create zones of ownership. I thought I was protecting the vision. I was actually choking it. Letting go was the most spiritual decision I made. 4. Roman, hospital administrator, Ukraine. Roman oversaw a trauma unit during wartime. Every detail came to him. After collapsing from adrenal fatigue, he re-evaluated. He built a tiered leadership model, empowered nurse captains, and implemented mandatory rest. I used to think leadership meant carrying it all. Now I know it means building people who can carry it too. 5. Abigail, Worship Director, UK. Abigail planned every worship set, ran rehearsals, and trained every singer. But her creativity was drying up. She feared releasing control would cost quality. When her vocal cords were damaged, she had no choice. Her interns stepped up and surpassed her expectations. God didn't give me this role to control people. He gave it to me to multiply them. 6. Musa, Business Consultant, Nigeria. Musa's firm grew rapidly, but he refused to hire managers. They'll mess it up, he thought. After losing a major client due to delays, he realized he was the bottleneck. He built an executive layer, instituted clear KPIs, and finally took a vacation. I confused control with care. True leadership is trusting what you've built to stand even when you step back. 7. Karina, NGO Strategist, Brazil. Karina ran a refugee housing initiative. She burned out after sleeping in the shelter for 20 nights straight. Her board intervened. She cried, "If I'm not here, who will see them?" Her mentor replied, "If you collapse, who will carry it forward?" That shifted everything. Letting others lead didn't betray the mission. It ensured it survived. 8. Elias, School Principal, South Africa. Elias handled every parent meeting, teacher evaluation, and disciplinary hearing. He wore available like a badge until a stress-induced fainting episode forced him to reconsider. He implemented a vice principal structure and peer-based discipline panels. I learned that leadership isn't about being irreplaceable. It's about making space for others to lead too. 9. Farah, Marketing Director, UAE. Farah's company promoted her, then handed her 3 departments. She didn't push back. 6 months later, her team had grown and so had her resentment. She realized she was doing 5 people's jobs. With coaching, she redefined her scope and set new boundaries. Saying no didn't make me less committed. It made me sustainable. 10. Jacob, Campus Pastor, Kenya. Jacob led every Bible study, oversaw every student group, and personally mentored dozens. When a student asked why no one else could lead a prayer, he realized he'd built followers, not leaders. He shifted strategy. Today, 12 students lead weekly prayer circles across campus. I was doing everything out of love, but it became limitation. Leadership is letting others grow even if they lead differently than you. Strategic tool, Jethro's map from overwork to optimization. Use this map to restructure your leadership flow. 1. Define your only you zone. What decisions absolutely require your presence or wisdom? What tasks are actually draining you but not essential to your role? 2. Delegate by design. Identify 3 recurring responsibilities you can hand off in the next 30 days. Name who's ready and invest in their growth. 3. Clarify decision tiers. Build levels. What can team leads handle? What needs executive oversight? 4. Establish boundaries. Mark 1 day per week with no urgent tasks. Create a Sabbath in your calendar for rest even during the week. 5. Build feedback loops. Monthly check-ins with your team to assess pressure points, not just progress. The Jethro map isn't just about survival, it's about scale. Because what you're building deserves to last longer than your energy levels. Reflection. What is fatigue trying to tell you? Where have I confused commitment with control? What's no longer sustainable, but I'm still saying yes to out of guilt? Who could rise if I stopped standing in their way? What would leadership feel like if I built more scaffolding than spotlight? Where is God inviting me to release instead of retain? You are not the entire body. You are a vital part of it. And the same God who called you also called others to carry the weight with you. Let them. Rest doesn't make you less faithful. Delegation doesn't make you weak. Structure doesn't dilute anointing, it preserves it. So take a breath. Build the team. Create the system. Let Jethro's wisdom become your rhythm. Even visionaries need structure. Chapter 8. Miracles in Dry Places. Leadership doesn't just test your faith, it tests your rhythm. It's one thing to believe in miracles when you're fresh, inspired, and clear. It's another when you're dry, angry, and exhausted. That's where Moses found himself. The people were complaining again, thirsty, angry, irrational. The desert sun was unrelenting. He had heard their grumbling before. But this time, he snapped. He didn't speak to the rock as God instructed. He struck it. Twice. Water still flowed. But something was lost. Obedience in frustration is the real test of leadership. God still provided for the people. But Moses missed something deeper. He misrepresented the rhythm of grace. Because miracles can still happen even when the leader is offbeat. But what a tragedy to lead from power, while losing intimacy. Dry places will test your endurance. But they also reveal your source. Do you strike out of anger or surrender? Do you lead from pressure or presence? Do you perform for outcomes or obey for intimacy? The myth of constant overflow. Some leaders falsely believe they must always be overflowing to be effective. That joy must always be high, vision always clear, emotions always stable. But leadership is not a highlight reel. It's a life of faithfulness, especially when your soul feels like a desert. God doesn't just perform miracles in lush gardens. He shows up in wastelands. Not because of the leader's perfection, but because of his own mercy. Dry doesn't mean defeated. Tired doesn't mean disqualified. You don't need to feel full for God to flow through you. Real stories. When leaders saw provision in pressure. 1. Thandi, social worker, South Africa. Thandi served in a township plagued by addiction and unemployment. After years of advocacy, nothing seemed to change. One day, exhausted and questioning her impact, she saw a former teen client, now mentoring younger boys. "Ms. Thandi," he said, "you're the reason I'm still alive." She hadn't seen fruit. But fruit had been growing. The desert made me think nothing was working. But faithfulness was building miracles I hadn't yet seen. 2. Eli, nonprofit CEO, USA. Eli's fundraising dried up during a recession. Staff morale plummeted. He prayed daily, but nothing shifted until a local bakery owner, whose daughter had been mentored by Eli's org, donated $100,000 unsolicited. "You didn't know," she said, "but you changed her life. Provision came not from my hustle, but from a harvest I didn't even know I'd sown." 3. Mariam, school principal, Lebanon. With schools underfunded and tension rising, Mariam used her own salary to buy books. Her burnout was real. But when a refugee student delivered a handwritten poem thanking her, something shifted. The student wrote, "This school feels like peace. I didn't realize that presence, not perfection, was the miracle." 4. Jacob, pastor, Canada. After losing half his congregation post-COVID, Jacob felt like a failure. He preached to empty chairs with weary faith. But a live stream reached a young man in prison. That man wrote, "Your message gave me the courage not to end my life." The room was empty. But grace was still full. God moved through what I thought was collapse. 5. Zainab, entrepreneur, Nigeria. Zainab's eco-startup ran out of funding. Investors ghosted. Her staff left. Alone in a co-working space, she received an email. A university wanted to license her biodegradable packaging curriculum. It didn't save her business, it rebirthed it. The death of one dream gave birth to 10 more. The rock still had water. 6. Miguel, pastor, Mexico. Miguel struggled with depression but kept preaching. One Sunday, he almost didn't show. He whispered a raw sermon, half tears, half scripture. Afterward, a visitor said, "I've never felt God like that before. I thought I was failing. But my weakness made room for glory." 7. Hannah, nurse, Philippines. Working in a flood-displaced camp, Hannah ran out of medicine and strength. Then a truck arrived, delivered by a driver who got lost and ended up rerouted to her location. The supplies were exactly what she'd prayed for the night before. "I didn't need to be strong. I just needed to be standing where the miracle would meet me." 8. Leo, artist, France. Leo's exhibit flopped. Critics mocked it. Finances were dry. But one piece, a broken sculpture titled "Still Here," was bought by a grieving mother who lost her son. "It's how I feel," she said. "Shattered, but present." That sale didn't pay my rent, but it paid my soul. That peace was the miracle. 9. Nadia, climate advocate, Bangladesh. Nadia felt invisible in policy spaces. Her grassroots work wasn't being heard. But one day, a UN delegate quoted her field data word for word in a global panel. She never got the credit. But the cause moved forward. It wasn't about applause. It was about impact. And impact came even in silence. 10. Bryce, church planter, Australia. Bryce launched a church that failed within 2 years. Disillusioned, he took a job as a delivery driver. One customer invited him to pray for their family. That moment became a weekly prayer circle. Within months, 40 people were gathering on a porch. I lost the building, but found the church. The miracle looked nothing like my plan. Strategic tool, the desert flow assessment. When leadership feels dry, use this to identify where miracles may be hidden in motion. 1. What looks like lack? Where do I feel exhausted, unfruitful, or invisible? 2. What still flows? Is God still speaking? Providing? Encouraging through others or outcomes? 3. Where has pressure revealed my real source? Am I leading from ego or encounter? What disciplines have survived the dryness? 4. What strikes am I making from frustration? Am I forcing outcomes God hasn't asked for? 5. What is God saying about rhythm? Do I need to pause? Or do I need to trust His provision even if it doesn't look how I expected? Reflection. What if dry seasons still carry living water? What part of my leadership rhythm is coming from pressure instead of presence? Where has God still flowed even when I felt faithless? What miracle may have happened, but I didn't recognize it because it looked too ordinary? Where have I struck the rock out of frustration when God asked me to speak with trust? What would change if I believed the desert is not punishment, but preparation? You can still lead in dryness. You can still obey through weariness. And yes, God can still flow through your cracks, not in spite of them, but because of them. The rock didn't flow because Moses was flawless. It flowed because God is faithful. So even now, strike, but with reverence. Speak, but with surrender. Lead, but with rhythm. Because even in dry places, miracles still flow. Part 3, Legacy over Limelight, Finishing Well. Covers chapters 9 and 10. The real test of leadership isn't how high you rise. It's who you become when you do. You've answered the call. You've navigated the chaos. You've led with courage in systems that didn't always understand you and in some cases, tried to destroy you. But now, the questions shift. Not can I lead? But can I finish with integrity? Not will I make it? But will my work outlive me? This part is for leaders who are carrying weight that titles can't measure. You're visible now. Respected, maybe even celebrated. But with that elevation comes isolation. Greater scrutiny. Greater responsibility. And a different kind of temptation, the one to hold on too long, to lead from ego, or to forget who you were before they knew your name. This is where Moses lived out his deepest strength, not in miracles, but in obedience with limits. He saw the promise from a distance and still handed the mantle to Joshua. He let legacy win over limelight. He let God define the finish line. These final chapters are a masterclass in how to end well. How to raise successors who don't need to copy you, but who carry the same fire. How to walk away with peace, not regret. How to live in such a way that your name doesn't just trend for a season, but testifies for a generation. If you care about impact that lasts beyond your platform, this part is your blueprint. Because the spotlight fades, but faithfulness echoes. And when history tells your story, let it say, you led with fire. You finished with honor. You made earth feel the weight of heaven. This is how legacies are born. Let's finish together. Chapter 9. When you see the promise, but can't enter. Not every promise is for you to finish, but your faithfulness still matters. Moses led faithfully for decades. He confronted Pharaoh. He parted the sea. He endured betrayal, complaints, rebellion, and silence. He received the law. He shaped a nation. But when it came time to step into the land he long dreamed of, God said no. He climbed Mount Nebo, saw the promised land with his own eyes. And then he died. This wasn't failure. It was faithfulness fulfilled in a different way. Sometimes, the leaders who do the hardest work don't see the final harvest. But that doesn't diminish their legacy. It defines it. You don't have to finish the race to be faithful. You just have to run your leg well. The unfinished assignment. In today's culture, we celebrate finishers, the founders, closers, and headline makers. But in Scripture, some of the greatest leaders never saw the end. Abraham didn't see the full nation. David didn't build the temple. John the Baptist didn't witness the resurrection. And Moses, perhaps the greatest leader in Israel's history, didn't enter the promised land. God wasn't punishing him. God was preserving the story. Because sometimes, God shows us the vision not for personal fulfillment, but for generational impact. This chapter is for every leader who wonders, what if I don't get to finish what I started? What if the breakthrough I prayed for comes after I'm gone? The answer: you're still part of the promise. Real stories, when legacy was bigger than the finish line. 1. Ijeoma, education pioneer, Nigeria. Ijeoma spent 25 years building literacy programs for underserved villages. Her dream was to scale her model nationally, but just before a breakthrough meeting with the Ministry of Education, she was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. She spent her final months training teachers instead. At her last workshop, a young woman she had mentored stood up and said, "You didn't just teach reading. You taught freedom." That woman now leads programs in 5 Nigerian states, using Ijeoma's curriculum. I didn't see the finish. But I saw the fire catch. And that's how I know it was worth it. 2. Harold, veteran pastor, USA. Harold pastored a small rural church for over 40 years. He never published a book, never filled a stadium, never went viral. When he retired, he struggled with a quiet question: did it matter? Years later, he attended a funeral. During the service, a young man tearfully shared, "If it weren't for Pastor Harold's late-night visit, I wouldn't be here today." Dozens nodded in agreement. Over coffee afterward, someone told him, "You didn't plant a church, you planted a generation." Legacy isn't always loud. It's often whispered through lives that were held together by your faithfulness. 3. Farida, architect, UAE. Farida spent nearly a decade developing blueprints for eco-friendly housing in desert regions. She poured her savings and passion into the project, only to watch it collapse when a major investor pulled out. Heartbroken, she stepped away from the field. 2 years later, one of her interns presented her designs at a global competition and won. That recognition birthed a new firm, now building sustainable communities across the region. I didn't build the houses. But I built the blueprint. Someone else picked it up, but the vision was still mine. 4. Gregor, public health leader, Germany. Gregor spent 15 years lobbying for mental health policy reform. He testified before lawmakers, built coalitions, and gathered data. Just weeks before the legislation passed, he died of a sudden heart attack. At his memorial, a parliament member held up the newly signed bill and said, "This wouldn't exist without him." His family later learned that his name had been added to the legislation's preamble in tribute. He didn't live to see it passed. But every clause carried his fingerprints. His vision now protects thousands. 5. Maureen, founder, Kenya. Maureen started a small mentoring group in Nairobi with 10 teenage girls and her own savings. Her goal was to build a Pan-African network for young women in leadership. But a late-stage cancer diagnosis cut her journey short. In her final months, she mentored her girls one last time and whispered, "Take it further than I could." Today, her alumni lead chapters in 5 countries and reach over 10,000 girls annually. She never stood on a global stage, but she raised those who now do. Her name lives in every success story they carry. 6. Julian, professor, Canada. Julian taught literature at a small university. He poured his life into students, never publishing a book of his own despite multiple offers. After his passing, former students compiled his handwritten lecture notes and stories into a book titled The Voice That Taught Us to See. It became a national bestseller in educational circles. His lessons, once limited to a classroom, now shape readers around the world. His words went further than he ever imagined. He didn't need to write the book, his life had already become one. 7. Dev, social worker, India. Dev worked tirelessly in India's urban slums, advocating for clean water and sanitation. His research formed the foundation of a policy proposal for parliamentary review. Before he could present it, he was seriously injured in an accident and had to retire. One of his protégés picked up the project and testified in his place. The policy was approved 6 months later. When it passed, Dev watched from a hospital bed and wept. The policy didn't carry my name. But it carried my heart. That was enough. 8. Rina, worship leader, Philippines. Rina never led from a main stage, but she trained dozens of young worship leaders over a decade. She kept to the background, coaching vocals, encouraging hearts, nurturing authenticity. After her passing from Lupus, a tribute night was held where 10 of her mentees led worship together. One of them whispered on stage, "She never needed the spotlight. She became our foundation." That night marked the launch of a worship collective in her name. She never recorded an album. But her voice lives in every harmony we sing. 9. Daniel, legal reformer, South Africa. Daniel spent years drafting child protection legislation, fighting uphill against bureaucracy and resistance. Just before final debate, a shift in leadership stalled the bill. Months later, Daniel died suddenly of a stroke. But his groundwork became the backbone of a new draft law passed under the next administration. At the bill's signing, a speaker said, "This is Daniel's law even if he never got to see it." He never stood at the podium. But justice now stands because he once stood alone. 10. Leila, climate scientist, Brazil. Leila spent her life studying Amazon deforestation, collecting data others ignored. Her findings were dismissed as alarmist. After her passing, her unpublished notes were featured in a documentary that went viral. The public outcry that followed pressured lawmakers to implement new protections. She didn't live to see the change, but it bore her name. She was mocked in life, but honored in legacy. Her data changed the law. Her warnings became wisdom. Strategic tool, the Legacy Lens Inventory. Use this to reframe your impact beyond the finish line. 1. What have you built that will outlive you? Programs, people, paradigms. 2. Who have you poured into that may carry more than you? Name 2 to 3 successors, students, or mentees. 3. What vision do you carry that may be seed, not harvest? Not every seed is yours to water. That doesn't make it less vital. 4. What limelight are you willing to let go of so legacy can live? Would you still lead well if your name was forgotten, but your impact remembered? 5. Where is God asking you to shift from owner to steward? Release the outcome. Obey the calling. Reflection. What if your finish line isn't the point? Am I more concerned with completion or obedience? Where do I feel the ache of unfulfilled dreams, and is that pain still holy? Who could I empower now even if I don't get the credit later? What does it look like to lead well knowing the result may happen after I'm gone? Would I still serve faithfully if my name wasn't attached to the outcome? You may not cross the finish line. But you're still part of the race. You may not hold the harvest. But you carried the seed. You may not see the promise fulfilled. But you stewarded the journey with honor. And that is enough. Because the point isn't ownership. It's obedience. The goal isn't limelight. It's legacy. So climb your Nebo. Look out over the land. Smile. And pass the baton. History will remember the fire you carried. Heaven already does. Chapter 10. Raising the next generation of deliverers. Your greatest act of leadership may be who you empower after you. Moses didn't get to enter the promised land. But he didn't leave his people without a leader. He laid hands on Joshua. He transferred not just authority, but weight, wisdom, and presence. Moses' greatest miracle may not have been splitting the sea. It may have been preparing someone else to walk further than he ever could. Because real legacy is not what you leave behind. It's who. Leadership that ends with you wasn't leadership, it was control. Leadership that births new leaders is what changes nations. It's not just about how many followed you. It's about how many were formed through you. The power of passing it on. We live in a culture obsessed with personal platforms. Build your brand. Protect your IP. Own your audience. Stay on top. But heaven's model has always been different. Elijah trains Elisha. Paul raises Timothy. Jesus pours into the 12. Moses commissions Joshua. Each one knew, your ceiling should become their floor. This chapter is for leaders who aren't just asking, what am I building, but who am I building? You don't multiply movements by holding the mic. You multiply them by releasing the mantle. You don't protect a legacy by hoarding authority. You protect it by distributing trust. The truth is, your work will eventually end. Your influence will change hands. The question is, will it collapse, or will it continue? You don't get to pick the next generation's style. But you can shape their substance. You can bless their momentum without controlling their method. Let go with grace. Let them lead with grit. That's what Moses did. And that's what we must learn to do too. Real stories, when leaders chose legacy over ego. 1. Aisha, educator, Kenya. Aisha built a thriving school in Nairobi, shaping students with innovation and care. After 20 years, she sensed a shift and started mentoring Miriam, a passionate young teacher. Weekly, they met over chai to discuss leadership, vision, and faith. Aisha gradually handed Miriam responsibility, first one class, then school-wide decisions. When she retired, Miriam took over seamlessly. Today, the school has doubled its reach. Aisha says, I didn't pass on a position. I passed on the heartbeat. Legacy is not in staying long, but in choosing who continues. 2. Theo, architect, Greece. Theo led a design firm known for sustainability and excellence. He noticed Sophia, a junior designer, had sharp instincts and big ideas. Instead of guarding prestige, he handed her a complex city renewal project. Theo mentored her through obstacles, championed her in boardrooms, and defended her during setbacks. When Sophia succeeded, Theo stepped back. Years later, she became creative director. My ceiling became her floor, Theo reflects. True leadership doesn't fear being outshined, it fuels it. Legacy is building ladders, not pedestals. 3. Jamila, community organizer, USA. Jamila spent decades advocating for housing justice. In high school protests, she met Devontae, a teenager with energy and insight. She began teaching him not just activism, but wisdom, how to negotiate, listen deeply, and endure criticism. She let him co-lead campaigns and speak at City Hall. Over time, he grew into a leader of his own. Now in his 20s, Devontae runs a national housing equity foundation. Jamila saw me before I saw myself, he says. Her mentorship became his mission. 4. Arun, non-profit leader, India. Arun founded a youth non-profit in Mumbai, but burnout taught him something critical. Success must be sustained by succession. He began mentoring Ria, a sharp young strategist with heart and hunger. He invited her into executive meetings, let her manage major events, and coached her through challenges. When she failed, he corrected with grace. When she succeeded, he stepped back. Today, Ria leads international partnerships. He believed I could lead before I did, she says. Arun's greatest project wasn't the non-profit. It was Ria. 5. Carmen, pastor, Mexico. Carmen led a vibrant church known for outreach and revival. She spotted Josu, a teenager with quiet authority and spiritual maturity. Rather than limit him to youth roles, she trained him for the pulpit. They studied, prayed, and led together. Josu made mistakes and learned from them. Carmen gave him more space. Now, he leads the youth revival movement spreading across the region. She didn't just see a helper. She saw a successor, he says. Leadership multiplies when it releases, not restricts. 6. Daniel, politician, Nigeria. Daniel served with integrity, and as retirement neared, he looked for someone to carry the torch. He saw promise in Amaka, a young legal aid. He assigned her real cases, brought her into policy discussions, and opened his network to her. Amaka grew bold and brilliant, drafting key legislation. When Daniel stepped aside, she ran for office and won. Today, she serves as the youngest official in her state. He opened the door, she says. Daniel didn't just lead. He launched. 7. Mai, tech founder, Singapore. Mai built an assistive tech startup rooted in empathy and impact. As her company scaled, she knew it needed new voices. She mentored Jason, a young coder with lived experience in disability. She gave him freedom to innovate, trusted him with design, and let him fail forward. Jason grew into the lead developer, improving inclusivity across platforms. She didn't need to be the smartest in the room, Jason says. She made space for others to shine. Mai's legacy lives in her successors. 8. Luis, chef, Spain. Luis ran a Michelin-starred kitchen, known for culinary mastery. He intentionally hired young chefs from underrepresented backgrounds. Yora, one of them, grew up undocumented and had raw talent. Luis invested in her skills, let her lead on big nights, and backed her restaurant idea financially. Today, Yora runs her own celebrated kitchen blending Spanish and global flavors. Luis gave me more than techniques, she says. He gave me courage. Legacy is not preserving your name, it's empowering another's. 9. Kwame, artist, Ghana. Kwame was a globally recognized painter, but his heart remained with the streets of Accra. He met Kojo, a young graffiti artist with raw voice and fire. Kwame let Kojo shadow him, learn techniques, and co-create. Eventually, they launched a public mural project across the city. Kojo now leads an urban arts collective empowering youth through expression. Kwame never made me feel small, he says. He showed me I had something to say. Real artists raise new voices, not replicas. 10. Rachel, CEO, Canada. Rachel led a global wellness brand with values at its core. At a retreat, she noticed Tasha, a middle manager with quiet influence and emotional intelligence. Rachel began mentoring her intentionally, assigning leadership roles, offering feedback, and celebrating her growth. Tasha rose fast. When Rachel retired, the board appointed Tasha CEO, the youngest in company history. Rachel didn't just model leadership, Tasha says. She made room for it in me. Rachel's greatest return wasn't profit. It was people. Strategic tool, the Successor Builder Canvas. Use this to move from high-impact leadership to high-replication legacy. 1. Name your mantle. What wisdom, influence, or assignment do you carry that needs to be passed on? 2. Identify potential Joshuas. Who shows signs of calling, character, and courage even if they're not fully ready? 3. Create a commissioning plan. What can you teach? What can you transfer? What can you release entirely? 4. Clarify their freedom. Don't clone yourself. What parts of your model are sacred and what's flexible? 5. Bless, don't hover. Give affirmation, not control. Let them lead even if they lead differently. Reflection. What would change if you believed your legacy is in others? Who are you currently leading that could outlast you if you'd invest more intentionally? What fears keep you from handing over the reins? Where are you still the center when you should be the foundation? What if your greatest achievement wasn't something you built, but someone you empowered? What would multiply if you shifted from leadership as ownership to leadership as stewardship? You're not called to lead forever. You're called to lead faithfully and then release wisely. Joshua is waiting. Don't just finish well, pass it on well. Because the promised land isn't just about crossing over. It's about who walks further because you showed them the way. Conclusion. Moses' leadership journey began not with a title or a following, but with a burning bush in the wilderness, a moment of divine disruption that redefined his purpose. He was not the most articulate, not the most confident, and certainly not the most eager. Yet through obedience, resilience, and an unshakable relationship with God, Moses became the liberator of a nation and a prototype of transformational leadership. His story reminds us that true leadership is not forged in palaces but in deserts. It's refined in the crucible of failure, obscurity, and surrender. Moses spent 40 years in hiding before stepping into history, proof that hidden seasons are not wasted seasons. They are training grounds for trust, character, and spiritual authority. In a world obsessed with platform, power, and performance, Moses offers us a countercultural call. To lead from humility. To intercede more than we impress. To obey more than we innovate. To carry burdens, not chase applause. As Moses stood on Mount Nebo, overlooking a promised land he would never enter, he embodied the paradox of legacy. He did not cross over, yet his leadership ensured that others did. His success was not defined by personal milestones, but by generational momentum. He was not obsessed with being remembered. He was committed to helping others arrive. You may never part seas or call down plagues, but you will be called to lead people through transition, through deserts, through resistance. Like Moses, you will face pharaohs of culture, of fear, and of self-doubt. You won't always feel qualified. But God will still say, I will be with you. So lead like Moses. Not perfectly, but faithfully. Not for glory, but for purpose. Not with ease, but with endurance. Let the fire of your calling never go out. Let your ordinary staff become a tool of extraordinary impact. Let your leadership echo not just in your lifetime, but in the lives of those who follow. Because the wilderness is waiting. So is your legacy. Epilogue. Moses didn't enter the promised land. And yet, his leadership outlived him. His influence echoed far beyond his lifetime through systems he shaped, people he empowered, and principles he lived. Long after the miracles faded and the battles ended, his voice kept speaking. Not from a palace. Not from a stage, but from a mountain. And it still speaks. Not just to pastors and prophets, but to founders and educators, to activists and executives, to creatives and coders, to city builders and changemakers, to anyone bold enough to lead with conviction in a world addicted to convenience. Moses is not just a spiritual icon. He is a leadership prototype for every industry and generation. He led through systems. He built structures. He formed teams. He faced resistance. He mentored successors. He carried vision when others carried fear. And most importantly, he led from obedience, not ego. Now it's your turn. You may never part seas or call down fire. But you will lead teams, families, systems, cities, ideas, or innovations. You will have to choose conviction over comfort. Character over charisma. Legacy over limelight. And when you do, your influence, like Moses, will transcend your role or resume. Because the greatest leaders don't just rise. They raise others. They speak from a deeper place where faith meets function, and purpose meets platform. So let this book be your beginning, not your conclusion. Let your work speak beyond deadlines. Let your vision build beyond your lifetime. Let your leadership echo not just in boardrooms or classrooms, but in the kind of legacy that can't be measured by metrics alone. Speak from your mountain. Speak systems into chaos. Speak strategy into despair. Speak justice into the broken. Speak hope into the future. You don't need a title to have authority. You don't need a stage to shift culture. You just need to say yes to what's burning inside you. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs your voice. Still speaking. Still building. Still burning. Just like Moses.